Ahora voy a dejar con ustedes a Véronique Delisle, gerente de proyecto del Centro de Investigación de Camet Energy, Recursos Naturales de Canadá. También a Steven Wong, que ha sido investigador del Departamento de Recursos Naturales del Gobierno de Canadá en el laboratorio Camet Energy. Él trabaja con socios del gobierno, la industria y la academia para actuar como catalizador de un futuro energético sostenible para Canadá.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Wong, and my colleague on the screen is Véronique Delisle. We're both from Natural Resources Canada's Camet Energy Laboratory in Varennes, which is just outside of Montreal. Today we'll be presenting on Canada's experience with the smart grid. Thank you very much for the invitation. Just quickly, the agenda today. So we'll present on Canada's landscape and electricity context, the status of smart grid in Canada with a little bit of focus on smart meters and advanced metering infrastructure, and a little bit on our international collaborations. So Canada's landscape, just to put everything into context of what we will give it later in this presentation, we have a land area of about 10,000 million square kilometers and a population of 38 million. That's roughly about twice that of Chile, but spread over a much larger area. We also deal with a lot of remote communities, a large majority of which are not connected to any large interconnected grid. So the key challenges about Canada is that electricity is a provincial territorial jurisdiction. What this means in essence is that Canada does not have a national power grid, but we have at least 13 different systems. So the experiences and the deployment of the electric grid across Canada really depends on which province or territory with which it is in. The experience of, say, British Columbia and the next door neighbor Alberta can be very different. They will have different generation mixes. BC would have, for example, a lot of hydro, whereas Alberta would have a lot of natural gas. Even the structure of the electricity systems can be quite different in terms of in most provinces, we have vertically integrated utilities. So distribution, transmission, generation, all owned and operated by the same entity, usually a crown corporation or government-owned corporation. However, we do have two market or deregulated systems in Alberta and Ontario. So these two systems are, again, completely separate from one another, but they are market-based systems that run electricity markets where generation is separated from distribution and transmission. And even then, their structures are entirely different from one another. Most interconnections in Canada are not between provinces, but are with the United States. They run north-south. We do have a Canada Energy Regulator. It's very different than, say, FERC. Again, the Canada Energy Regulator doesn't look at intra-provincial electricity stuff. It just oversees inter-provincial and international trading. Natural Resources Canada, where I'm part of, what role we play is we encourage cooperation. We can encourage cooperation between provinces and territories, and we can provide funding for example, grid modernization. So while we don't have a direct impact, we can't say exactly what tell provinces what to do. We can provide funding for such projects to advance certain areas of the smart grid. I'll pass it to my colleague, Véronique.
So Canada's, can you go back to the next slide, Stephen? Yeah, okay. So Canada's electricity context is that we have one of the cleanest electric grid in the world, with 80% being non-emitting. So of that, 15% is nuclear, and the rest of that 80% is renewable energy. So we have 60% of hydroelectricity, and 7% that is non-hydro renewables, which includes wind and solar. So Canada has a vision for a clean, innovative economy, balances both economic growth and environmental protection. The government has placed a priority on clean growth and addressing climate change, both of which can be achieved through the development and adoption of clean technologies and innovation. So even though we have a very clean grid, we also have some commitments. For example, by 2050, we want to be net zero emission when it comes to energy. Also, as part of the COP26, in addition to that commitment, it was announced that we wanted a net zero grid by 2035. So in order to be net zero emission by 2050, we'll need to decarbonize several of our sectors. This includes the transportation sector, industry sector, building sector. So this decarbonization will occur through electrification, but electrification with clean and renewable energy technology. So even though we have a very clean grid, we have a lot to do in the future years to reach those decarbonization objectives, to make sure our grid becomes even cleaner, coping with the increase of electricity requirements in the country. Next slide, please. So speaking of increase of electricity needs, so what we're seeing here is a scenario, an evolving scenario all the way to 2050 produced by our Canada energy regulator. Note that these scenarios do not include the 2050 net zero emission target and the 2035 net zero grid target. But what we can see on this graph is in terms of capacity. So if we look on the left, in 2010, we had an overall capacity of 132 gigawatt in Canada. This capacity is expected to increase to 210 gigawatt by 2050. Just to give you an idea, I believe in 2010 in Chile, the capacity was 15.9 gigawatts, so nearly 16. So Canada is about 12 times more than Chile. So in terms of capacity by 2050, this increased capacity means an increase in solar use by a factor of 6, as well as 27 gigawatt more of wind production. In terms of electricity, so in terawatt hours and really electricity production, in 2018, we were, as we saw in the previous slide, at 641 terawatt hours. So in 2050, we would be at 821 terawatt hours. Hydro would still be a main component of our generation with 56% of hydro. So it decreases because we have more production. The percentage decreases because we have more production overall. And 20% more wind in 2050 than we have now in than we had in 2010. Next slide, please. So moving forward with the, what's the status of smart grid in Canada? So in order to look at the trends and status of smart grid in Canada, we use some key metrics. So some of these key metrics include smart meters deployment. So right now in Canada, we have about 13.3 million of smart meters. So this represents at least 80% of our overall meters. So we could say that smart meters is deployed at a 80% level in Canada, so largely deployed. And of that, since 2018, we saw an increase of 1.2 million. Another metric that we consider is the electrification of the transportation sector. So looking at both the number of electric vehicles on the road and the number of EV chargers. So in terms of electric vehicles, so we are at 204,000 electric vehicles on the road right now, but that includes an increase of 110 since 2018. So it has almost doubled in the last 2 years. And this is also coupled with an increase of the number of public electric vehicle chargers. So we currently have 13,000 in Canada, but about 5,000 of these chargers were installed since 2018. Of these chargers, 82% are level 2 and 18% are level 3. So level 3 means it's a DC charger, whereas level 2 means it's an AC charger. Other key metrics include, of course, storage and renewable energy. So in terms of installed solar photovoltaic capacity, we are currently at 2.9 gigawatt AC, which corresponds to an increase of 11% since 2018. Of that, 67% is centralized and 33% is decentralized. So what do we mean by decentralized? Decentralized means that there's actually self-consumption at the location where it's being produced. So we can think of building integrated photovoltaic system or building applied photovoltaic system. So this would be the 33% that we're talking about here. Just to give you an idea in terms of the solar potential in Canada, sometimes we might think that there's not a great solar potential in Canada, but it's not true. So I looked at the numbers to compare with Chile, for example. So in Canada, our daily average practical solar potential, according to the Global Solar Atlas, is 3.816 kilowatt hour per kilowatt peak, whereas in Chile, it's 5.365 kilowatt hour per kilowatt. So 1.4 times more in Chile than in Canada. In terms of wind installed capacity, we are currently at 13.6 gigawatt AC installed, which is an increase of 6% since 2018. Of that, 93% is connected to the transmission system and 7% to the distribution system. Since 2018, we've also seen a significant increase when it comes to storage. The number of projects related to storage has actually almost doubled since 2018. We currently have 500 megawatt of storage, which corresponds to 4.1 gigawatt hour. Next slide, please. We also, as part of Natural Resources Canada, we collect information from our provinces and territories to have a better picture of the status of smart grid in Canada. So the following slides will describe some key highlights of that data we're collecting. Next slide, please. So one of these highlights is that since 2018, 70% of the public funding related to smart grid totalized $259 million. And this was related to support distributed energy management systems and electric vehicle integration. Also, when we ask our provinces and territories about the top drivers for smart grid, they mention renewable energy targets. So we need to have more renewable energy. There are challenges to the integration, and smart grid can help us definitely to deal with these challenges and deal with, for example, the variability of renewable energy sources like wind and solar. Also, we looked in the previous slide at the number of storage projects in Canada. Well, 80% of these storage projects are actually related to battery technology that is used to store renewable energy and support grid reliability. Next slide, please. Grid modernization priorities for provinces and territories include distribution automation and management, cybersecurity, voltage and reactive power management, as well as outage management. So this is what our provinces and territories have identified as key priorities for grid modernizations. And on the right, well, this I mentioned already that our charging infrastructure for electric vehicle has almost more than doubled actually since 2018. Next slide, please. And finally, for those key highlights on the status of smart grid in Canada, we have a few demand response programs in Canada that are managed by utilities. These demand response programs are to help reduce peak demand, but in certain cases, they are also there to facilitate the integration of variable renewable energy. So, for example, in some cases, there are locations where they have a lot of wind production at night that they want to use locally. So demand response programs to use that wind energy when it's being produced locally are in place. There's a significant research happening in terms of advanced inverter functions, so inverters that can provide additional support to the grid, including balancing of variable renewables with frequency ride-through, voltage ride-through functions. We also have, well, some, as Stephen will show in the following slides, smart meters were implemented 15 years ago. So there's a rollout of new smart meters with advanced capabilities in certain jurisdictions. So these advanced capabilities include, finer temporal resolution when it comes to data collection and transmission. In some cases, the utility can know on which phase the client is. Some smart meters can provide peak power and voltage, and some smart meters can also be used as a hub to communicate with the other smart devices in the house. Next slide, please. This is showing the cumulative public investments in smart grids since 2003. So as I understood, in Chile, it's all privatized. In Canada, the different governments, so federal governments, provincial, territorial government, can provide funding for smart grid projects. So since 2003, public investments have been provided for 538 projects, which corresponded to actually $726 million of investment. But the project value is greater because, of course, sometimes those programs require that the private industry puts some money into it to leverage the public investment. So this total project value corresponds to $2 billion, a little bit more than $2 billion. And you can see here where, in what topic those investments were made. With the little graphics there. So there were some investment in storage, microgrids, grid monitoring and automation, electric vehicle integrations that you see in almost all locations, distributed energy resource management, demand management, as well as stakeholder engagement. And actually, in the last, since January 2019, 260 million was made in public investment. So there's been a significant increase since 2019. Next slide, please. One of our latest programs at Natural Resources Canada, which is very interesting, is called the Smart Renewable and Electrification Pathway Program. So this program will be investing 964 million over 4 years to advance smart renewable and grid modernization project. And the very interesting part of this program is that it's really focusing on how can distributed energy resource provide grid services that were traditionally provided by synchronous generators like hydro, natural gas, and coal. So there's a really an important grid service aspect to that program. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Véronique. I've just been keeping track of the questions. I'll just add to one thing that might help highlight one of the questions here. This program provides 10% grant or funding, up to 10% funding or for established renewables such as solar and wind. It provides 30% funding of the project for emerging renewables, for example, tidal. And it provides up to 50% funding for projects related to grid modernization that are undertaken by the utility. Onto the smart meter deployment in Canada. So smart meters in Canada deployment, as we heard yesterday with the presenter from Oshawa, Ontario. It started between 2005 and 2010 in Ontario via legislation, and that at the time was one of the bigger projects in North America. It has since continued across Canada to hit above 80-85% deployment across Canada, again, varying by province and territories. The capabilities of these smart meters may vary. Of course, those smart meters that were bought in 2005 to 2010 are going to have won't be as advanced and won't be as new technology as those that are being sought out now, just simply because of advancements in technology. For example, there could be different communications capabilities, there could be different things that are measured. A question in the chat measured, are there minimum requirements that are set out federally? In terms of capabilities, there are, as far as I know, there are no minimum requirements set out federally, but in terms of measurement, it is federally regulated. So measurement accuracy is something that is done by Measurement Canada. And it dictates, for example, that for every fixed amount of years, a certain sample has to be taken out of service and tested. And they have to meet certain accuracy standards. If they don't, then you have to consider replacement programs, and there are details on that through Measurement Canada. The benefits and justifications for installing smart grids have varied across Canada, and they include, for example, enabling time of use rates or peak power pricing, empowering consumers to effectively manage consumptions, and this may be through such initiatives such as green power. Just allows consumers to better see what their consumption is, not on a monthly basis as it typically used to have been, but on an hourly time scale or less. Increasing operator visibility, identifying outages, and reducing outage times. I think that we went quite into depth in that with the Oshawa presentation yesterday. And it just, again, the operator knowing what's happening on the distribution system. Knowing where the outages are and being able to dispatch crews without waiting, for example, for phone calls. Facilitating renewable integration. Reducing non-technical losses. I think the presentation that we had at the beginning of today talked quite a bit about that, and the possibilities of using AI with smart meter data to help identify those types of losses. Improving utility load forecasts. Again, smart meters gives the utility much greater visibility and granularity on loads. Easing up billing processes and costs. For example, it's no longer required to manually send someone out there to read meters. It's all done wirelessly and automatically. And finally, automatic connection and disconnection of customers from the grids is another benefit that was shown from smart meter deployment. As opposed to waiting a few days to send out a crew, it can be done just with the click of a button. To help facilitate the integration of smart meters and its acceptance, some utilities did offer opt-out options at a cost. For example, such an opt-out option might say if you want to keep your old mechanical meter, you had to pay $100 upfront or something like that, and then you had to pay a monthly cost in order to send someone to physically go and read the meter. In terms of advanced metering infrastructure drivers, so kind of going back up a level, the electrification of all sectors is leading to surge in demand, encouraging the adoption of efficient and flexible energy technologies, including AMI. As we had indicated earlier, Canada has many net zero targets, which could double the amount of electricity required from our power system, and such that AMI will play a key role in helping assist in that transition. There's growing interest in digitalization of the power system coupled to modernization of the grid infrastructure. So modernization and digitalization going hand in hand. Smart grid is about integrating that communications infrastructure. And that's something that AMIs can help provide. Finally, a major driver for advanced metering infrastructure is the customer awareness, engagement, and empowerment. AMI's advanced metering infrastructure, smart meters, give customers much more ability to control or oversight over their own power consumption. And one of the enablers of this is, for example, the green button standard. And it was also talked about yesterday, but it's essentially, it enables the use of smart meter data, not just electric smart meter, but also natural gas and water, for example, for users to better understand their electricity consumption pattern in a user-friendly platform. Within Canada, such standard is being mandated across the province of Ontario by 2023, by 24, or to 2024. But this is by no means the only province that allows consumers to see their consumption. How this plays in the overall greater picture of things is that we've kind of understood smart grid to have kind of three different components. The foundational utility systems, which is essentially what is absolutely necessary to run the power grid. Anything from outage management to SCADA to substation automation to circuit topology and basic telecommunications infrastructure. Up one level is smart grid technology applications, of which smart meters play a key role. And smart meters are there to, again, to support smart grid technologies, but also to support such programs such as demand response, cybersecurity, microgrids, fault analysis, and distributed energy resource management systems. Finally, we get to the advanced grid applications, which we're not quite there yet. Well, we're moving towards, and this is where I guess Canada is advancing sits at the moment in terms of advancing and adopting. And that includes, for example, advanced outage detection and dispatch, advanced demand response. So advanced demand response, just talk a little bit more. It's no longer just about peak shaving, which is kind of the prime goal of a lot of demand response programs at the moment, but also advanced demand response could be something that responds to, for example, increased renewable production. So there's a lot of wind at the moment. So instead of reducing consumption, can we increase consumption to get that wind energy? And that could very much be very useful, especially with the adoption of more electric vehicles, where electric vehicles can create a huge change in demand. Advanced inverter functions, where we have grid services that can be provided by the loads or by demand or on the distribution system, is also another really necessary place to go as more and more variable renewables and inverter-based resources come. And this is just to support, for example, stability issues and whatnot that might occur with the lesser role that synchronous generators may have on the grid. In terms of international collaborations, we have two major ones. The first is the International Smart Grid Action Network, which is formally established as an International Energy Agency technology collaboration program, consisting of 25 member countries plus plus the European Commission. And it really works on advancing smarter and clean electricity grids to global network experts. It's really about information sharing and bringing together experts in the field to help give information to better inform better policies and policy making. The second one is the Mission Innovation 2.0, which is so Mission Innovation 2. Phase 2 was launched actually in Chile. This particular one with regards to power system is known as the Green Powered Future, co-led by China, Italy, and United Kingdom. And again, it's about bringing together experts to demonstrate by 2030 power systems will be more effectively able to integrate up to 100% variable renewable energy. This initiative is a little bit more on the technical side, but again, it's a lot focused on information sharing, and it's based on 3 pillars, or three knowledge areas. The first is the creation of affordable and focus on affordable and reliable variable renewable energy technologies. The second is on understanding system flexibility and market design, where flexibility is a very hot topic these days in terms of power systems. It's flexibility in that it's not just the responsibility of generators to provide the power to the power system, but flexibility can be provided by loads and distributed energy resources. Finally, system integration, data and digitalization. Data and digitalization, which has very much been a theme and will be a theme of grid modernization going forward. Thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at the emails there, and we're free to take any questions at the moment.
There was a question on the chat from Patricio referring to the tax credits of renewable. What percentage of the investment is considered to help? There are many programs related to clean energy. Some are federal, but most of them are actually coming from the provinces to a federal program called the Low Carbon Energy Fund. So the federal has the Low Carbon Energy Fund and gives money to the provinces to manage their own clean energy program. So there are so many programs that it really depends on the provinces on what they're offering. So it's very hard to give an exact number on that.
Perfecto, muchas gracias. Le pido ahora al resto de los participantes de este panel si se pueden unir, porque tenemos varias preguntas.
Por favor, enciendan sus cámaras, Katy.
Si pueden encender sus cámaras y sus micrófonos, por favor. Tenemos una pregunta para Alexandre. ¿Cuáles son las amenazas cibernéticas actuales que han visto en la práctica dentro de la región y qué soluciones podemos aplicar?
Bueno, yo creo que últimamente, me disculpe, mas por algún motivo el host no me deja ligar la cámara, ¿no? No me está, no sé si hay alguna restricción ahí.
Sí, ahora deberías poder.
Ah, sí, ahora sí. Bueno, los últimos 2 años, yo puedo decir a ustedes que las amenazas que están más presentes, tanto en el ambiente corporativo como en redes industriales, son justamente las amenazas relacionadas a Hanson, que hubo prácticamente un crecimiento, como comenté, de 400% en los últimos 2 años. Más también algo que está muy fuerte la cuestión de filtración de datos. Entonces, yo creo que tanto Brasil como el mercado chileno está muy fuerte las nuevas leyes de protección de datos, ¿ok? Entonces, básicamente ya hay casos de grupos de hackers que lo que hacen es que hacen una invasión en una determinada empresa, colectan estos datos personales que son datos privados y simplemente después hacen una amenaza contra estas compañías diciendo, mira, ustedes van tener que hacer un pago por una multa por vazamiento de datos privados, todo eso. Y esta multa, por ejemplo, yo no sé exactamente el mercado chileno, mas, por ejemplo, acá en Brasil, dependiendo del tamaño de la corporación, puede llegar a $1 millón. Entonces, yo veo mucho este tema también de ataques que tiene como objetivo de filtración de datos de clientes. Esas son las 2 cosas que están más fuertes estos últimos 2 años. Entonces, Hanson y ataques con objetivo de filtración de datos datos confidenciales, ¿no? Desde de la red de los clientes.
Muchas gracias, Alexandre. Clarísima la respuesta. Vamos a seguir con Véronique y Steven. Voy a juntarles dos preguntas dentro de una. La primera es si existe una norma nacional o requisitos mínimos para el medidor inteligente o cada empresa decide por su cuenta las características del equipo. Y lo otro importante es cómo en torno al cambio de medidores inteligentes, el gobierno usa una política comunicacional, más incentivos económicos, impositivos, etcétera. En el fondo, ¿cuál fue la estrategia para incentivar el cambio masivo a medidores inteligentes? Y esta pregunta específicamente es porque en Chile tuvimos un cambio a medidores inteligentes que se intentó hacer y que no fue bien recibido por la ciudadanía y que producto de esto finalmente no pudo realizarse.
So I'll have a go first at this question, and Véronique can help correct me as I go. So is there a national standard or minimum requirements? So there is no national standards for smart grid. The requirements or capabilities of smart grids are set out by either the provinces or the utilities themselves, and they will vary both on a provincial basis and perhaps even utility by utility. As I had mentioned earlier, the only requirement kind of federally is the Measurement Canada standard, or Measurement Canada, which requires that these meters be accurate, and they have a testing procedure and measurement procedure in place to make sure that they are measuring consumption correctly. And this goes not just for smart meters, but anything that requires weights and scales measurements, essentially. In terms of drivers for the smart grid or justifications for the smart grid, sometimes these justifications were put through by the province, or sometimes these justifications were put through by the utility. Again, there was no federal push. It is a provincial and territorial item. Some utilities, they just decided that they applied to the regulatory board saying that we need these smart meters for various reasons. And we can go back to the slide that I showing all those reasons that were listed, including ease of billing, enabling of different rate tariff structures, reduction of non-technical losses. But these justifications will vary depending on the province or territory and the systems of which they may be implemented.
Yeah, and once the province or territory energy regulator has approved, then the utility can move forward. Regarding social acceptance, it varied, but as Stephen mentioned, one of the key elements, let's say in the province of Quebec, was to say you can opt out if you do not want a smart meter, but this will be the cost for keeping your old one, and the monthly costs or every 2 month cost, so that someone can actually come to your house and read the meter.
Perfecto. Se entiende muy clara la respuesta. Una consulta para Cristina. Para las aplicaciones de soluciones de Big Data, ¿requieren de regulaciones en protección de datos en el país, ya que Chile no tiene aún una normativa ligada al GDPR como en Europa?
Sí, efectivamente existe una normativa que protege los datos personales de los clientes y de todas formas, toda esta algoritmia aplicada, aparte de cumplir la normativa de protección de datos del cliente, no hace falta utilizar datos personales o que puedan identificar a un cliente concreto. En muchas de estas aplicaciones no hacen falta esos datos. Simplemente con patrones de consumo y otros datos no identificativos de un cliente ya se pueden desarrollar esas aplicaciones. Aparte de eso, hay una serie de procedimientos de seguridad para que los datos personales sean estén totalmente protegidos. Por tanto, desde mi punto de vista, sí hace falta regular la protección de datos personales de los clientes.
Perfecto.
No sé si con eso respondí a la pregunta.
Sí, muy bien, Cristina, muchas gracias. Tenemos otra pregunta para Véronique y Steven. En referencia a los créditos fiscales para renovables, ¿qué porcentaje de inversión se considera ayuda?
Yeah, that's what I tried to answer before. So the federal government has little incentives for clean energy, but it has a fund, and then this fund is used to help the provinces to do their own program. So every province have their own program in terms of helping with the deployment of renewable energy. So there are as many answers as there are provinces. It really depends. I don't know, Stephen, if you want to add something.
No, other than the fact that I had mentioned the breakdown, 10% for established, 30% for emerging, and 50% for grid modernization projects. That's not a tax credit, but that's just the fund, again, going to the funds. I think one general experience is that whatever is chosen is something that has to be revised continuously and continuously looked at as technologies develop, because a certain percentage or a certain amount that was, say, done 10 years ago might not be applicable 8 years ago, or 1 year or 2 years from now, as technology and as these technologies get cheaper. So it has to be continuously examined.
One of our provinces had a very generous feed-in tariff at some point, which slowly reduced. So that's what Stephen means. It started at 42 cents a kilowatt hour for a small system, if I'm not mistaken, Stephen.
Something like that for PV.
Something like that for photovoltaic installation, and then it was revised many years to eventually, actually, it doesn't exist anymore. So that was something that was tried out in Ontario. But it was specific to Ontario, so that the consequence of that was there was a lot of PV system installed, but then it was revised because of many reasons. So yeah, many different experiences in Canada regarding to different systems to incentivize the installation of renewable energy technologies.
Perfecto. Muchas gracias. Muy clara también la respuesta. Con esto ya estamos en el tiempo, así que vamos a agradecer a todos nuestros expositores y panelistas a la vez. Ha sido muy rica la conversación y bueno, agradecerle especialmente a los que están en otros países, que están con horarios distintos a los nuestros, que se hayan podido conectar. Eso es muy importante. Así que muchas gracias. Ojalá podamos contar con ustedes también más adelante y damos por cerrado este bloque.
Muchas gracias.
Ok, muchas gracias a todos.